Pokémon releases hundreds, sometimes thousands of new cards every single year, and this is all an attempt to keep the game fresh. However, unfortunately, right now, the game is about as fresh as hearing Mariah Carey for Christmas. There is nothing fresh about the game. And this all stems from one major problem, and that is, well, Dragapult. If you have been playing the Pokemon trading card game in the recent years, you would have heard Dragapult EX. That is because it is an absolutely broken card, and just deck in itself. And it's become a much bigger problem recently, and that is for a few reasons, one of which being rotation. So, if you don't play the Pokemon trading card game, rotation happens every year, and this is what filters out old cards. You don't want the format to consist of thousands and thousands of cards, because you could find some really broken combos, and then you would have to talk about card bans and all that kind of stuff, and honestly, it's just a lot of, like, admin for Pokemon people. You know, it's probably difficult. Like, I mean, take a look at the expanded format, which is like the format where this kind of stuff is allowed. That is the stuff that you see there violates Geneva Conventions on a daily basis. It is abhorrent. Like, there are some things I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy in that format. So, well, you know what, I might make a video about that later on, but today we're talking about the problem in the standard format, and it is honestly just as bad. There is something running around in the current standard format that is just absolutely dominating it. So, what is rotation? Like I said, it filters out old cards. And recently, we saw the most recent rotation, which filtered out Gardevoir EX. And I say specifically Gardevoir EX, I guess I could mention Gholdengo as well, because these were two decks that kept Dragapult in check. These were two decks that had a pretty good matchup against Dragapult, right? Dragapult wasn't able to just run freely. Like, don't get me wrong, Dragapult, like, wasn't just an auto loss into these decks. It still did good. In fact, it got second place at the World Championships, which is like, you know, the Super Bowl of Pokemon. It only lost to Gardevoir in the finals, and it's won many tournaments, even with Gardevoir and Gholdengo being illegal. So that didn't stop it from being a great deck. It was still a really good deck, but it had something keeping it in check. And when rotation, you know, truck-kunned Gardevoir and Gholdengo, Dragapult was left alone. Right? And right now, the Pokemon trading card game standard format is just Dragapult's world, and every other deck is just trying to survive in it. And I feel like there's definitely one deck that can beat Dragapult very consistently, but we'll get to that shortly. There is, however, lots of decks that stand zero chance. Like, it is the Hydrogen Bomb versus Coughing Baby type of format. You are either playing Dragapult or losing to Dragapult, right? Those are the options. So, I'm going to put up some stats on the screen right now, and this was the first event of this rotation. You would think, you know, there's going to be a lot of fresh ideas, people trying out new decks and trying to have fun and this kind of stuff, because it's a new format, right? New stuff going on, yay! No more Gardevoir, no more Gholdengo. And if we take a look at the Phase 1 of this tournament, this was over in Prague, in Europe. European people do love Dragapult, but we'll get to American people very shortly. So we saw 15% meta share being Dragapult EX and 10% share being Dragapult Blaziken. So we'll put it at 25. That is one of every 4 decks being Dragapult EX, which is already quite a lot, right? These are some big numbers. These are like maybe not Wilt Chamberlain 100-point game numbers, but these are like, you know, Luka Doncic on an average day numbers, right? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And then we have, like, obviously a bunch of just random bullshit go. Like, the next most played thing was 7% of unclassified. Unclassified is just shit, right? It's just people being, I want to play insert random bulk EX here, and that's that. And then a bunch of, like, random other things that no one really gives a shit about. But then we look at Phase 2, right? And Phase 2 is where things get a little like, oh, okay, we've gone from 25% being in total of Dragapult to now 31% of being a total Dragapult. Now, what does this mean for the greater good of Dragapult? It means they did pretty good. It means they converted pretty well, right? So we went from a 20%, I think it was, no, so we went from a 15% of just straight Dragapult to a 22% of straight Dragapult, and then a 10% to a 9% of Dragapult Blaziken, because that deck just isn't as good as regular Dragapult, right? Dragapult is just better when it's just Dragapult because it's more consistent, and that's the problem with Dragapult, is consistency. So now if you're able to do Dragapult stuff consistently, you're a threat, a major threat. And as this tournament went along, we found Dragapult in the finals against Crustle, and you might be thinking, there's no way Dragapult could beat Crustle in the finals. It beat Crustle in the finals. and Dragapult took away the first win of the new format, right? People weren't really happy about that. People were thinking, you know what, we should band together and fight against this dictatorship that is Dragapult. So you know what they did over in America? You know what they did? Well, they went ahead and gave a 31.9% meta share of day 1 decks to Dragapult. That is now basically 1 in 3 decks is Dragapult over in Los Angeles. And the next closest was Mega Starmie. Mega Starmie. Look, Mega Starmie is okay against Dragapult. It's not a good matchup for Starmie by all means, right? And look, don't get me wrong, all these other decks, maybe not Festival Lead, all these other decks think they have a good matchup against Dragapult. Team Rocket's Mewtwo thinks it has a good matchup against Dragapult. Alexander Anspas thinks it has a good matchup against Dragapult. They don't. On paper, they do. Unfortunately, the game's not played on paper, it's played on the playmat. Rocket's Mewtwo is going to brick 1 of 2 games, right? So you just have to win 1 game and just slow play the shit out of them in the rest. And Alexander Dunsparce folds to a single Stadium Bomb plus Phantom Dive, right? Like, these decks on paper beat Dragapult, but the game is just not played on paper. And then if you thought that was bad, we went to day 2. 47.1% of decks is Dragapult. That's basically there's a 50% chance you're going to be playing against Dragapult. I hope you're ready to learn the Dragapult mirror, buddy. Like, I hope you're ready to learn Chinese, because this is absurd. I have never seen numbers this high, like, at all. We saw 156 Dragapult decks, and the next closest of 24 being Raging Bolt. Also, what the hell is that guy doing in this room with us? Why is he still out and about? Thanks, Ian Robb. You gave people hope, thinking Raging Bolt is going to beat Dragapult. It does not. It gets thundercunted, right? Like, Dragapult is just insane. But if we take a look at these decks, what do we notice? There is a clear type notice thing, right? And that is a lot of grass decks. Festival Lead, grass. Teal Mask, Ogre-Bon, Meganium, grass. Team Rocket's Mewtwo and Spidops, kind of grass. Grass is there. Same with Raging Bolt, grass, right? Not Raging Bolt itself, but it has Teal Mask, Ogre-Bon, and grass. And obviously, there is, I think, a savior of this format. So if you guys would just stop playing your silly little grass decks that lose to Dragapult anyway, the real men of the format could come in and play Zoroak, and we could actually, you know, put a check on Dragapult, right? But no, we're too busy fiddling around with Festival Lead and fucking Team Rocket Spidops. Put it down, let us play Zoroak to an event, and Curb Stomp Dragapult. Just give us 1 event. And if we can't put an end to Dragapult, go back to your grass guys, go back to him. But just let us show you that we've got it. Unk still got it, alright? Unk still got it. I haven't played the game in a while, right? Mainly because Pokemon Live sucks and I live in South Africa, so there's fucking 0 events here. But Zoroark against Dragapult is like taking candy from a baby. That matchup is not close. I could money match any Dragapult player on Zoroark, and as long as Zoroark sets up, which I know, big ask, I'm probably beating them. I'm sorry, I am 99.7% sure I could beat any Dragapult player if they aren't specifically teched for Zoroark. That matchup is it's just free. Right, it is, I'm gonna use this analogy again because a coughing baby versus Hydrogen Bomb. It is not an easy matchup for Dragapult whatsoever. And you're gonna go down in the comments and be like, oh, but when I play Zoroark against Dragapult, you're bad. You're bad. So, Zoroark is just one of those decks where, in my opinion, you just have to know how to play the deck. It is a deck that, it's really weird. It just has a skill diff. Like, the Zoroark is only good when good players play it. For example, Piper Lepine and Liam Halliburton, right? Those are like the 2 standout Zoroark players, in my opinion. Those are the goats of Zoroark, right? When they play the deck, it looks good. When anyone else plays the deck, it's just shite. So if you are saying you can't beat Dragapult, it's because you can't beat Dragapult, right? That's fine, right? Skill diff and all that. Why do you think Dragapult is so good? So I've gone over the thing where it's you know, God of War and Golden Gorgon, the things I kept in check. And look, don't get me wrong, I love Dragapult. I love him, right? I have a lot of merch of Dragapult. Right? He is my guy. However, we do kind of have to put a stop to him. Like, I've got a full shelf of Dragapult. I've collected every Dragapult ever printed, including the GameStop and McDonald's promo, right? I love the guy. But he does need to be checked a little bit, because after Goldengo and God of War rotated, there's not many things to check him, and you might be saying Clefairy is there to check him. The problem with Clefairy is that it's traded easily, right? So the whole thing with Dragapult is that it trades very favorably into things, because even though it's a 2-for-2 trade, you are still essentially setting up damage counters on the bench to maybe on the following turn get 3 prize cards. And if you took 1 prize card early, all of a sudden that Clefairy and that 60 damage counters that it was placed on the bench, that's more valuable than just knocking out a Dragapult, right? So Clefairy sure can knock out a Dragapult easily, but you have to commit 2 energies to that Clefairy, right? And that means you're not attaching to something like, let's say, a Raging Bolt. That means on the following turn you are going to have to use yet another Crispin. It limits your options, right? Whereas Dragapult is building up a board state of attaching energies to different things. Its whole identity is chaining together Dragapults, right? And that's just why it's so good, because to get to a Dragapult, you first need to get the Dracloak, and Dracloak is a built-in draw engine, right? Which means you are consistently finding pieces you need to chain together Dragapults. Whereas Clefairy is a liability. When you bench it and attach energy to it, it is going to die. And sometimes it might not even die that turn. If you're playing against, let's say, Dragapult Dusknoir, they might keep your Clefairy alive and Phantom Dive something else to set up a checkmate, because then they're going to go Dusknoir 130 to Clefairy, knock out something else inactive, and 6 damage to your Clefairy, and all of a sudden they've taken 4 prize cards in a single turn, right? It is absurdly, silly to think that Clefairy is the answer to Dragapult. Clefairy was only good against Dragapult in God of War, because you could use a different attacker. You could use Mew EX, and paired with Monkey Dories, you could have a really strong Phantom Dive. You could now knock out a Dragapult and also knock out a Dracloak that they are preparing to set up for the following turn. And that's the strong part, because you're breaking that chain of Dragapults. Like I said, they want to chain Dragapults, so if you're able to prevent them from chaining Dragapults and getting value out of them, it's not easy for them to win the game, right? And you might be saying, oh, but we can do the same thing in Team Rocket's Mewtwo. Yes, you can use the Mimikyu to copy a Phantom Dive with a Clefairy on the bench, but there's many problems with this. One, you don't play Monkey Dory, which is the main thing, so that 60 damage counters honestly isn't that valuable. If anything, that 60 damage counters is bad, because you now are giving them, unless you're knocking out like a Badoo or something, you are now giving them damage to move over with their own Monkey Dories. 2, you are Team Rocket's decks. You do not want Team Rocket's Pokemon in play, because it hinders your ability to draw cards. It hinders your bench space. It's just not synergistic, right? Like the whole thing about the Team Rocket's archetype is that it's its own little ecosystem, right? It's like buying a MacBook while having an Android phone. It just doesn't make sense. Like, if I have an Apple Watch, an iPad, a MacBook, and then I go out and buy an S25 Ultra, why? Just go out and buy an iPhone, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, you are taking something in a deck that inherently has an okay matchup against the deck. You have Articuno. Rocket's Mewtwo is just difficult to deal with for Dragapult. Anyway, it has 280 HP as a 2-prize Pokemon. It's just not value for Dragapult. Like, that's the thing. That you're not giving Dragapult value. You never want to give Dragapult value. And then now you can use an ace spec like Max Belt, and now you're one-shotting Dragapult anyway, right? And you're not damaging your consistency, you're not damaging your bench space, you're not damaging your draw power throughout the entire game, right? And that's the thing with Clefairy, is that it is very splashable, but it just ruins decks. People think that if I play Clefairy, I can beat Dragapult. That's all the respect they're giving to Dragapult. That's not the point. If I Clefairy your Dragapult, you're going to go ahead and set up another Dragapult and unfair stamp me. I'm going to be sitting there with 2 cards, no answer to your Dragapult, and now I'm going to get rolled over because you've just absolutely abolished my board state and also my hand, right? You've robbed me. And people will think, oh, but that's just unlucky. He had unfair stamp. It's Dragapult, they have everything all the time. It's like Doctor Strange, they open a little fucking hole, unfair stamp, bam. Boss's orders, bam. Energy, bam. At this point, the best way to beat them is just put a Glock on the table and say, your go. Or just, hey, I was just thinking, you should scoop. Your turn, though. I'll pass. They'll still find a way. They'll honestly still find, they'll item lock you. And now you can't use your Thule Beam, you know? So it's it is a bit silly. But like I said, I think Zoroak can most definitely beat Dragapult, because it's just not it makes the game very difficult and awkward for Dragapult to play. Even though it's not easy for you to one-shot a Dragapult, the thing is that Dragapult can't one-shot you, number one, and they can't really damage you and prepare you for a knockout, because if they do 200 damage to you, you're going to go 30 damage, move it off something, and then knock out with Powerful Rage onto the Dragapult. Now they're like, well, look, I can finish off this Zoroark, but I've already committed an attack to it, and on the following turn, like, I am probably just going to lose, because now all of a sudden they can go ahead and go, Rampaging Thunder, knock out that, or Boss's Orders, some benched Tracloaks, knock out both my benched Tracloaks with Fire Guy, right? Flame Body Cannon. And that's the thing, it's like, it's a very awkward matchup for Dragapult to play, and that's the thing that Dragapult really doesn't want to find, these awkward matchups. That's why I would say Team Rocket's Mewtwo is a little bit more difficult for Dragapult to play, because 280 is just a little bit out of the range. Like, 260 is still fine for Dragapult, because they can, do the thing where they go 200 damage to this guy, 60 damage to that guy, and the following turn they'll boss up the bench guy that did 60 damage to, knock out that one, and then knock out the one that they 200 to as well, right? And that's like the kind of thing you would do with Goldengo, right? That's what Goldengo had to play around. That's why they were playing Picnic Basket and Turos, and sometimes they were playing Monkey Dories and stuff like that. So they were trying to find a way to make it as awkward for Dragapult to play, and I think that's something that people aren't realizing. Like, Clefairy doesn't make the game awkward for Dragapult to play. It doesn't hinder their game plan, right? They are very prepared for you to take a knockout. They don't really give a shit about that. They give a shit about not being able to respond, right? And that's the thing that Zoroark, especially with Hero's Cape, does so well. It makes the game so awkward. With multiple Monkey Dories, you can keep your Zoroark alive for 2 turns. You can tank you can tank Phantom Dives, right? You can just go ahead and chain attack to Zoroark, and they just can't do anything about it. On top of that, with Dragapult, it is a very flexible card. And before we go any further, I just wanted to, like I saw something on the stream that I've never seen before. We had a straight up Dragapult breakdown. We had, it's not even like a phase 2, phase 1 break. We had a Dragapult breakdown. And look, something that caught my attention here was that Dragapult Dusk Noir was the most played Dragapult deck, right? Which I think is quite interesting, because obviously Dragapult Dusk Noir doesn't have a great matchup against straight Dragapults, and this is kind of what we saw, because straight Dragapult ended up beating Dragapult in the finals, right? And it was Dragapult EX with Hammers that ended up winning. And Dragapult EX with Hammers is insane to me, because this just means Dragapult is not at its limit yet. It can do more. You're telling me you can find 4 slots in your deck to take out to add Hammers, right? And every once in a while, Hammer doesn't do anything. It's just a blank card, right? It's just I'm going to play this card. Oh, nothing happened, right? That means Dragapult doesn't need more cards. It genuinely doesn't. It's now just taking the piss. It's calling you shit. It's kicking you while you're down, right? And then we had Dragapult Blaziken, who's still trying to do it. Unk still got it in a way. And then we got Dragapult that Unsparse. Obviously that one, I think it was Mateusz Leszkiewicz who won with Dragapult that Unsparse. So hell yeah, that's still alive and kicking. And then we had straight Dragapult being pretty good as well. But it is an insane amount of Dragapults, right? So that's the thing, Dragapult just has options, like many ways to be built. Like we said, with a straight Dragapult, you have Dragapult Hammers, you have Dragapult that Unsparse, which I guess isn't the straightest way to play it, but it's still kind of straight Dragapult with additional consistency, whereas Dragapult Dusk Noir is an additional consistency, it's an additional power level, but you are cutting consistency to have that additional power. Same as Dragapult Blaziken, it's not consistency, it's energy consistency, but not draw consistency. That's why I think that the Unsparse and the just straight version is the best, because you don't want all these extra cards to draw into that just aren't Dragapult, right? And that's the thing, Dragapult loves itself. It's very narcissistic. It's better by itself, right? It doesn't need a partner. And honestly, I'm scared for the future. I looking at what Pokemon's printing, it's just shit. It's garbage. Alright, maybe that Ghost Veil, I'll make a video on that. That Ghost Veil shit looks hella fun and might be Dragapult. Single prizer that is literally Dragapult proof. They gave all of the attackers, prevent all effective attacks and abilities and shit done to this Pokemon, essentially saying, you can Jet Headbutt me and Phantom Dive me, but leave my fucking bench alone. Leave your Monkey Dory shit, none of that. Dusk Noir can still work, I'm pretty sure. Maybe not. Anyway, that's a video for another day. Thanks for watching, and if you guys love Dragapult, smash subscribe. If you guys hate Dragapult, smash subscribe. If you guys are watching, smash subscribe.